Evan Hale's hands were raw from the acid soap, his knuckles burning as he pushed the heavy scrub brush across the black stone floor. The air inside the colossal stable was thick with the sharp scent of chemical cleaners, the musk of living beasts, and the metallic tang of recycled oxygen. He worked in silence, his eyes fixed on the ground, trying not to look up at the creatures towering above him. These were not storybook dragons from old human myths. They were bioengineered war beasts, each the size of a shuttlecraft, their scales forged in colors that seemed to drink and twist the light. Their bodies were built for destruction, razor-edged claws, teeth like metal spears, and eyes glowing with alien fire. Muscles shifted under armored hides with each breath, and the faint shimmer of embedded energy circuits pulsed along their necks. The stable was part of a massive alien city hollowed into the heart of an asteroid, a place where human labor was cheap and human lives were cheaper. Evan was just another debt worker from a mining moon, scraping the filth from the pens of beasts that could crush him without effort. He knew better than to make eye contact with them. War dragons were said to obey only the alien handlers who wore command rigs, neural crowns wired to send coded pulses into the dragon's engineered brains. Without those, a human standing too close to a war dragon's pen risked being ripped in half before they could scream. Evan kept his head down, scrubbing the dried blood from a feeding trough, when a low rumble vibrated through the floor. He froze, the brush in his hand dripping pink water. Slowly, against every instinct, he looked up. The largest dragon in the stable, a black and gold giant named Zerath, was staring straight at him. Its pupils narrowed to slits, and its breath steamed in the cold air. Evan felt the weight of that gaze pressing into him, a predator's calculation. He swallowed hard and stepped back, waiting for the alien guards to shout at him to move away. But no command came. The guards were already backing up, their eyes wide. One of them muttered something in a language Evan didn't understand, but the fear in his voice was clear. Zerath moved. The dragon's massive head lowered, its neck muscles shifting like coiled steel cables, until its snout was only a few feet from Evan's chest. Evan's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He expected the hot stink of its breath, the sudden lunge, the snap of bone. But instead, Zerath stopped and exhaled slowly. The hot breath rolled over him like a wave, and then, impossibly, the dragon bowed its head. The sound in the stable changed. The other dragons had gone silent. Every single one of them was watching, their heads turned toward him, eyes unblinking. The guards whispered to each other, their voices sharp with panic. Evan stepped back, his heel hitting the edge of the trough. His mind spun. This wasn't possible. No human could make a war dragon submit without the command rig. That was the first rule drilled into him when he started work here. Never approach. Without an alien handler present. Yet here he was, alone. And the most dangerous creature in the stable was lowering itself as if waiting for his touch. The alien stablemaster appeared from the shadows, his tall frame wrapped in dark handler robes. His narrow, pale eyes moved from Zerath to Evan and back. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice thin and sharp. "Nothing," Evan said quickly, his throat dry. "I was just cleaning." "Do not lie," the stablemaster cut in, stepping closer. "War dragons obey no one without the mark." The word carried a weight Evan didn't understand, but he didn't have time to ask. Zerath gave a low, throaty sound, something between a growl and a purr, and the other dragons shifted restlessly, their tails scraping against the metal bars. One of the guards took a step toward Evan, hand hovering near the shock prod on his belt. "Stay away from him," the stablemaster snapped. "Touch him, and the beasts will tear you apart." The guard froze. Evan stared, not sure he had heard correctly. The dragons protecting him? That made no sense. But the way their eyes glowed in the half-light, The way they leaned forward in unison, it was as if an invisible thread tied them all to him. He felt something then. A faint pulse, like a second heartbeat. Not his own, but echoing inside him. It was coming from the dragons. It was coming from Zerath. And in that silent, impossible moment, a thought brushed against his mind. Not words, exactly, but a meaning as clear as speech. You are ours now. Evan's breath caught. His hands trembled, but he didn't step back. Somewhere deep in the asteroid city, a signal pulsed again. Low, almost hidden beneath the hum of the stable machinery, and the dragons shifted in response. They weren't looking at the aliens anymore. Every one of those burning eyes was fixed on him. And Evan knew, with a cold certainty, that something had just changed forever. The stable's alarms began to hum low in the background, a sound Evan had only heard once before, when a dragon had broken free. But this time, no creature was rampaging. No pen doors were open. The tension came from the air itself, as if the massive asteroid city sensed something it could not name. The alien stablemaster moved with controlled urgency, his long fingers dancing over the command console mounted into the wall. A holographic display flickered to life, showing streams of strange glyphs Evan couldn't read. The stablemaster's pale eyes darted to him, then to Zerath, then back again. It cannot be, he muttered in his language, the words sharp and quick. Evan took a step back, trying to keep the pen's thick bars between himself and the dragons, but they shifted. With him, their massive heads following in eerie unison. The guards whispered to each other again, but this time Evan caught one word in the alien tongue that he recognized from overhearing traders in the city markets: bonded. The stablemaster turned suddenly and barked an order. Two guards left at once, their boots echoing on the polished black floor, disappearing into the long corridor beyond the stable. Evan's stomach tightened. He wasn't sure if they'd gone to get help or to bring someone worse. Zerath moved again, lowering himself so close that Evan could see the faint lines of circuitry embedded beneath his scales, pulsing with golden light like a slow, alien heartbeat. It was beautiful in a terrifying way. Evan didn't know why, but he reached out. His fingers brushed the surface of a scale, warm and impossibly smooth, and the moment he made contact, his head filled with visions. He was no longer in the stable. He was flying. Stars streaked past him as massive fleets clashed in the void. Dragons like Zerath dived through enemy lines, tearing warships apart with plasma breath. He felt the rush of their wings, the heat of their fury, the ache of wounds that weren't his. He was Zerath for a heartbeat, and then the vision shifted. He saw a vast chamber, lit by pillars of molten light. In the center was a circle of alien elders, their faces hidden behind smooth, expressionless masks. They spoke in unison, their voices echoing through his skull. "The heir has been found!" The vision shattered. Evan staggered back, his chest heaving. The stablemaster was watching him with a gaze so sharp it felt like it could cut through bone. "You touched him," the alien said, his voice low and dangerous, "and he let you." "I didn't," Evan began, but the stablemaster's hand shot up for silence. "Do you understand what this means, human?" Evan shook his head, his heart pounding. "It means," the stablemaster said slowly, "that every war dragon in this city will hear his call now." As if on cue, a deep, resonating roar rolled through the asteroid's hollow chambers. It wasn't Zerath. It wasn't even from this stable. It came from far away, yet every dragon here responded instantly, lifting their heads, their eyes burning brighter. Evan could feel the roar in his bones, and worse, he could feel something answering from inside him. The stable doors burst open, as the two guards returned, but they were no longer alone. A figure entered behind them, cloaked in black armor traced with glowing red lines, a helmet shaped like the angular skull of a dragon. He moved with deliberate precision, each step silent despite the weight of his gear. Evan didn't need to be told. This was someone high-ranking, someone dangerous. The figure stopped just a few feet away and tilted his helmeted head toward Evan. When he spoke, his voice was cold metal. "So, you're the one." The stable master lowered his head, in something like respect. "Commander Varric, the bond was not initiated by us. The dragon chose." Varric's helmet turned slightly toward Zerath. The dragon did not look away. Instead, Zerath's eyes glowed so brightly they reflected in the commander's visor. "Then," Varric said, his voice dropping even lower, "we will have to take him to the Nexus before the others find out." "Others?" Evan asked before he could stop himself. Varric's head snapped toward him, and for a moment the stable seemed to grow colder. "There are factions in this city," Varric said. "Some will want to protect you. Most will want you dead." He stepped closer, the red lines on his armor pulsing faintly. "And they will come fast." Somewhere deep in the city, another roar sounded, this one closer, louder. Evan didn't know how, but he understood it wasn't a warning. It was a summons, and it was meant for him. The roar that shook the stable seemed to pull at something deep inside Evan's chest, like an invisible thread tied to his very soul. His knees went weak, and for a heartbeat he thought he might collapse right there on the slick black floor. Zerath stepped forward, pressing one massive claw against the bars of the pen as if to shield him. The stablemaster's control console blared a new alarm, sharper, faster, urgent. Lines of alien text scrolled so quickly, even the stablemaster struggled to keep up. He muttered curses under his breath, his voice low but edged with fear. Varric's helmet tilted slightly as he scanned the room, reading things Evan could not. "They're already moving," he said flatly. 3 hunting parties armed and closing fast. This place will be overrun in minutes." The stablemaster snapped something in reply, but Varric only turned his visor toward Evan. "We leave. Now." Evan's instincts screamed to demand answers. What hunting parties? Why him? What was happening? But the way Varric's voice cut through the air left no room for argument. The stablemaster hesitated. "If you take him through the city, the bond will do what it's meant to do," Varric interrupted. He stepped to the pen controls, entered a code, and the thick energy bars shimmered before vanishing. Zerath stepped free, his movements slow but filled with controlled power, like a predator deciding whether to strike. Every other dragon in. The stable went still, their eyes locked on Evan. He could feel it again, that strange connection, a pull, a silent understanding that wasn't human thought but was somehow clearer than words. The nearest guard shifted uncomfortably under their gaze, his weapon trembling slightly in his grip. "Move!" Varric ordered. Evan found himself walking without thinking, staying close to Zerath's towering form as they crossed the stable floor. When the massive doors opened to the city beyond, Evan froze. The city was unlike anything he'd ever imagined. Miles of twisting bridges and vertical towers carved into the inner walls of the hollow asteroid. Great plasma-lit arteries of traffic streamed through open voids between buildings and, beneath it all, the vast central core glowed like a small sun. The air thrummed with the sound of distant engines, alien voices, and something else, dragons. Somewhere far above, 3 of them wheeled in the open-air caverns, their wing beats, shaking the lattice of metal walkways. They were coming closer. Varric didn't slow, striding into the flow of beings moving along the nearest bridge. The crowd was a strange mix, dozens of alien species, all sizes and shapes, most ignoring Evan entirely, though a few turned to stare, at the sight of Zerath walking free beside a human. Whispers spread. A cluster of market vendors went suddenly quiet as they passed. Evan caught the same word again in the alien tongue. Bonded. The tension in the air thickened. Varric led them into a narrow side tunnel lit by strips of pale blue light. "The Nexus is in the core," he said without looking back. "If we reach it, you may survive the day." Evan swallowed hard. "And if we don't?" "Then you'll wish you hadn't been chosen," Varric said. Before Evan could ask more, a deep metallic clang echoed through the tunnel from ahead. Varric stopped instantly, one hand going to the strange weapon on his hip. The blue lights flickered. Then the shadows moved. Figures stepped into view, blocking the tunnel entirely. They were dressed in jagged armor, their helmets shaped like fanged maws, eyes glowing a cold, predatory white. The lead one raised a hooked blade and pointed it at Evan. "The boy comes with us," he said in a voice that hissed like steam. Zerath growled low, the sound rolling like distant thunder. But the armored figure didn't flinch. "He does not belong to you." Varric's stance shifted subtly, his weight lowering, his hand ready on his weapon. "No," he said. "He belongs to the dragons now." The moment hung, tense and razor-thin, until another roar exploded through the tunnel, this one so close it rattled the walls. A shadow passed overhead, blotting out the lights, and Evan knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever was coming was not here to help either side. The tunnel shook as if the asteroid itself had taken a blow. Dust drifted down from the ceiling, and the pale blue lights flickered wildly before cutting out entirely. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but darkness and the echo of that impossible roar, a sound so deep Evan felt it in the back of his teeth. Then a shape emerged from the shadows, vast, sinuous, and wrong in ways his mind couldn't quite grasp. It was a dragon, but not like Zerath. Its scales were cracked and blackened, its wings tattered like burned fabric. Where its eyes should have been, twin pools of molten orange light burned, and its breath steamed in the cold tunnel air. Every step it took left a smear of smoking scorch marks on the floor. The armored assassins in front of them hesitated, their glowing eyes darting from Evan to the creature. "That's not one of ours," the leader hissed. "Fall back!" His words were cut short as the beast lunged with terrifying speed, slamming its massive head into him. The impact shattered metal, sending the assassin flying into the wall with a crunch that echoed down the tunnel. Varric moved instantly, shoving Evan behind him while drawing his weapon, a long, sleek rifle that hummed with an inner power. "Keep moving!" he barked and fired. A blast of pure white energy struck the creature in the neck, but it barely flinched. Instead, its molten gaze locked on Evan, and for a moment, the world tilted. Something inside his head pulsed, an alien pressure pushing against his thoughts. He saw flashes, burning cities, screaming crowds, dragons chained and torn apart by machines. And through it all, he felt a single, terrible hunger. "It wants me." Zerath stepped forward then, positioning himself between Evan and the blackened dragon. His scales flared with golden light, brighter than before, and his chest expanded as he let out a roar that seemed to shake the very air. The sound wasn't just noise, it was command, authority, the voice of something older and greater than the city itself. The corrupted dragon froze, its molten eyes flickering, and for a second, Evan thought it might obey. But then the orange light flared brighter, and it lunged again. Varric fired twice more, the shots tearing into its wing, but the beast crashed forward, its sheer size filling the tunnel. Zerath met it head-on, claws and teeth clashing in a storm of sparks and fire. The air grew so hot Evan could barely breathe, the smell of burning metal mixing with something sharp and chemical. Varric grabbed Evan's arm, yanking him toward a narrow maintenance hatch in the wall. "Move! Now!" Evan hesitated, his eyes locked on the fight, but Varric's grip was iron. They slipped into the hatch, the cramped space forcing them to crawl, the sound of the battle fading only slightly behind them. "What was that thing?" Evan asked, his voice shaking. Varek's helmet tilted slightly toward him. "A Forsaken," he said. "Dragons that fall to corruption. They serve no master but their hunger." Evan's chest tightened. "Then why did it come after me?" Varek didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was lower, almost reluctant. "Because the bond isn't just power. It's a beacon. And now that you carry it, every Forsaken in the sector will know exactly where you are." Before Evan could respond, the hatch ahead of them opened into a wide, dimly lit chamber. It was circular, its walls lined with strange machines that pulsed faintly like breathing organs. In the center, a platform hovered, its surface marked, with the same alien glyphs Evan had seen earlier. Varek stepped onto it and gestured sharply. "This will take us closer to the Nexus. Stay close to me, and don't speak to anyone we meet." As Evan obeyed, Zirath emerged from another tunnel behind them, battered but alive, his golden scales dimmer now. The great dragon's eyes met Evan's, and in that silent gaze, Evan understood something chilling. This was only the first one. Others were already coming. The platform began to hum beneath Evan's feet, lifting them silently into the darkness above. The air around them shimmered faintly, as if reality itself was bending to make room for the ascent. Evan kept his eyes on Zirath, who stood unmoving. Beside him, wings folded tight, his battered frame radiating a quiet, watchful strength. Varek's stance was tense, one hand still on his weapon, as if expecting an attack even here. As they rose, the chamber walls slid past, revealing glimpses into other levels of the asteroid city. Vast markets lit with alien lanterns, mechanical, forges sparking like miniature suns, crowded docks where ships shaped like skeletal birds prepared for flight. Everywhere they passed, heads turned to watch. Some eyes widened in fear, others narrowed in calculation, but none dared step close. It wasn't just Zirath's presence. It was the unspoken weight of the bond. Evan didn't need to understand their language to feel it. The air thickened whenever someone looked at him, like they knew something he didn't, something that had nothing to do with cleaning stables. The platform slowed and stopped in a cavernous hall unlike anything he had seen before. The walls glistened like black glass, veined with lines of faint blue light that pulsed in rhythm with his own heartbeat. In the center stood a structure that seemed alive, towering pillars that twisted and curled like frozen smoke, all connected to a core that shimmered with impossible colors. Varek stepped off first, scanning the shadows. "The Nexus," he said simply. Evan followed, his gaze drawn to the core. As he got closer, a low vibration began in his chest, like standing too close to a giant engine. But it wasn't mechanical. It was aware. He could feel it watching him, the way Zirath did, though this presence was older and far less patient. Without warning, an alien figure stepped from behind one of the pillars. It was tall, draped in robes of shifting silver fabric that seemed to drink in the light. Its face was hidden by a mask carved into the likeness of a dragon's head. "The human," the figure said, its voice soft but carrying easily through the vast hall. "The dragons chose him." Varek inclined his head. Slightly, his voice clipped. "He is bonded. The Forsaken have already marked him." The masked figure tilted its head, studying Evan in a silence that stretched uncomfortably long. Finally, it spoke again. "Then you have little time. The bond must be anchored before they come in force." Evan frowned. "Anchored?" The figure took a slow step closer. "Without the anchor, the bond will consume you. Or worse, you will draw them all here." The thought sent a shiver down his spine. "How do we anchor it?" The figure turned toward Zirath. "The dragon must give willingly. Its life, its strength, its freedom, all bound to yours." Evan felt his throat tighten. That sounds like slavery. The figure's masked gaze lingered on him. No. If it is given, it is not chains. If it is taken, it is death. Zerath lowered his massive head until his molten gold eyes were level with Evan's. In them, Evan saw no fear, only choice. For a heartbeat, the noise of the hall seemed to fade away. He thought of the Forsaken, of that molten gaze burning into him, of the way every dragon in the stable had gone still when he'd first met Zerath's eyes. Something inside him whispered that this decision would change far more than his own fate. He placed a trembling hand against Zerath's scales. If we do this, it's not because I own you. It's because we stand together. Zerath blinked, once slow and deliberate, and a warmth spread from where Evan's palm touched him, flooding his arm and chest until it was almost unbearable. The Nexus core flared with blinding light. The masked figure stepped back, its voice low but urgent. It begins. All around them, the blue veins in the walls brightened to brilliant white, and a deep sound like 1,000 wings beating filled the air. Varric's visor tilted toward the far doors. "Too late," he said. The shadows beyond the hall moved, and the first Forsaken stepped into the light. The hall's temperature seemed to drop instantly, the warmth from the Nexus light swallowed by a cold that bit into Evan's skin. The Forsaken dragon stepped into view, larger than the one in the tunnel, its blackened scales jagged like shards of broken obsidian, its molten eyes burning with a hunger so intense Evan felt his knees weaken. The air shimmered around it, distorting as if reality itself was bending away from its presence. More shapes emerged behind it, each a twisted echo of a true dragon, their bodies scarred and malformed, wings trailing ragged membranes that dripped with a glowing toxic fluid. The sound of their claws scraping the black glass floor rang like metal on stone. Zerath moved without hesitation, stepping between Evan and the advancing creatures. The golden light rippling through his battered scales grew brighter, searing through the shadows until it painted the Forsaken in stark relief. Evan felt the bond surge, a pulse of raw power that was both exhilarating and terrifying, like a living tide rushing through his veins. The masked figure raised one long, robed arm toward the Nexus core, and the twisting pillars around it began to move, slow at first, then faster, winding together like the strands of a tightening knot. "The anchor must hold," the figure's voice cut through the rising roar of the Forsaken. Varric was already moving, his rifle unfolding into a heavier form, multiple barrels spinning with a rising whine. He fired a blinding burst at the lead Forsaken, the impact knocking it sideways but not slowing it for long. The thing roared, the sound vibrating through Evan's bones, and charged. Zerath met it in mid-leap, their collision shaking the entire hall. Claws screeched across scales, and fire, red and gold, erupted between them. Evan's breath caught as the other Forsaken surged forward. He could feel Zerath's voice in his mind now, not in words, but in raw emotion. "Stand with me." He didn't think. He just stepped forward, planting himself beside the dragon's massive shoulder. His heart pounded and the bond flared again, brighter than before, until golden arcs of energy leapt from his hands and wrapped around Zerath's form like living armor. The Forsaken hesitated at the sight, their molten eyes narrowing. Evan realized they could feel it too, the connection, the strength, now anchoring into something unbreakable. The lead Forsaken lunged again, but this time Zerath's strike was faster, his claws raking across its neck in a spray of molten sparks. Varric's fire cut down another, its twisted body crashing into the floor with a sickening crunch. The Nexus core's light reached a blinding peak, and the twisting pillars around it locked in place with a deep, resonant boom. Evan gasped as the warmth from the bond turned into a steady, rhythmic pulse, like a second heartbeat synced with his own. The masked figure's voice echoed through the hall. It is done. The bond is anchored. For a brief, terrible moment, everything went still. Then the Forsaken nearest them shrieked, a sound of fury and fear combined, and the rest turned in unison, retreating into the shadows as if pulled by an unseen force. Evan's legs almost gave out, the sudden absence of danger leaving him dizzy. Zerath lowered his head, pressing it gently against Evan's chest in a gesture that was both reassurance and acknowledgement. Varric approached, scanning the darkened doorway where the Forsaken had vanished. "They'll be back," he said grimly. "Stronger and in greater numbers. The anchor only means they can't take him. It doesn't mean they've stopped hunting." Evan met his gaze, feeling the steady pulse of Zerath's heartbeat echoing in his own. "Then we'll be ready," he said, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. The masked figure inclined its head. "The bond has chosen its path. Now the war will follow you." Evan looked at Zerath, and for the first time, the idea didn't scare him. Somewhere beyond the asteroid's walls, in the cold void between the stars, the Forsaken were gathering, but so were they, and, when the time came, the dragons would answer, not because they were commanded, but because they had chosen.